Hello YouTube and Patreon, this is Nathan P. Butler, and this is our project update for the month of February 2023. Again, for what it's worth, there won't be a whole lot of these left, at least in terms of monthly installments. We'll be doing these in February, March, April, May, and then in June for any sort of like last straggler folks who joined the Patreon pretty late to get a chance to still have their name in one of these. But then after that, I expect the project updates to be more stretched out because, of course, the Patreon itself is closing. And in doing so, that eliminates the need for the monthly cycle of these to address those who are supporters over there on Patreon. So keep that in mind. There will be more project updates after mid-year, but they'll be more spread out rather than monthly. As to the Patreon, again, that is patreon.com/Nathan P. Butler. Let me thank those of you who are backers over there, starting out with the Travelers through the Butlerverse, the $1 tier, the folks who get thanked in the credits of videos like these, and I say them aloud even though it's not technically part of the thing because, hey, why not when it's a manageable number, right? If perhaps there is ever to be a supplemental edition of a Saga on Home Video 2nd edition, they'd also get their name in the Patreon credits there, just like those who are part of it up to a certain point were able to do so in the 2nd edition. I don't know if there'll ever be a supplemental edition to go along with the 2nd edition. I'm not working on anything like that right now, but I expect that if I were to write anything else in the future, that's probably what's going to be the most likely, unless it's like essays for C-Quart or something like that, again, if I get invited to do that. So, the Travelers include David Bittner, John Sullivan, Kai Jacoby, Story Mode, Travis Cook, Jeremy Goss, Ben Abrams, Jacob Kapoor, Tony Jenkins, and Kevin Kriener. Then we have the denizens of the Butlerverse who get what the other folks got, but also get access to those audio commentaries. At this point, almost all the commentaries for Star Wars The Clone Wars have been released, and all the ones for Forces of Destiny have been released, and quite a few at this point, and heading into the next month or so, have been released for Tales of the Jedi. For those who are wondering what these are, they are audio files, they're MP3s that you essentially download, and then you listen to while watching episodes of The Clone Wars or Forces of Destiny, or now Tales of the Jedi. It essentially says, you know, in order to align this MP3 with the episode, go ahead and start the episode, then pause it wherever. I'll count down from 3, and I'll say play when the countdown hits 0. Hit play at that moment, and you should be able to watch right along with me. And basically the idea is that it's sort of like doing a live viewing, almost like a reaction, except a little more research, and it gives us a chance to sort of watch the series together in absentia, so to speak. Those will be available as long as the Patreon itself is still up. After the Patreon is gone, they will no longer be available at all. This tier, the denizens, include Ben Whitmer, Mark D., Thomas Navin, Zach Whitbeck, Matt DeRocher, Walker Langstrat, Kyle Pellegrini, Joey Zitzman, Stephen Malicia, Robert Medina, Jeremiah Mustard, and Jaina Keller. Then we have the nobility of the Butlerverse, the $10 tier folks, and these are the folks who get what everybody else got that I mentioned from both of those tiers and get access to that exclusive Q&A video every single month. No word quite yet on exactly how these folks are still going to have access to these after the Patreon ends. I'm thinking probably what I'll do is create an unlisted playlist of all of them and share that link right before the Patreon closes with those who were members at the time that it closed, or something along those lines. But the members of that group include Connor Steyerman, Matthew Hardesty, Ennis, Big Mac Davis, Jonathan Confer, Andrew Bentis, and Benjamin Handelman. The latter of whom, Benjamin Handelman, has been with us since the beginning of the Patreon, which is awesome. As for new content that has been released, we'll hit Patreon, then hit YouTube and anything else, and there is one other thing I wanted to address here near the end that is sort of the tale of a bad day, which perhaps has a lesson in it for fellow collectors, and something I should keep in mind for myself, of course. So on Patreon, we of course had some commentaries, and we had a Q&A and so on. So the last of these project updates was put online on January 23rd. On February 1st, we had the Clone Wars commentary released for Unfinished Business, the last of the Bad Batch arc, which chronologically is the 2nd arc out of 3 in Season 7. We did have the Nobility of the Butlerverse Q&A number 62, put up on February 7th. And then the commentary for Tales of the Jedi, Episode 3, Choices, went up on February 8th, along with a commentary for Clone Wars Old Friends Not Forgotten, the 1st episode of the final arc, which went up on February 15th. Again, those are sort of staggered. The 1st and the 15th, that's the Clone Wars commentaries each month, the guaranteed ones each month, of the 2 per month until Clone Wars is over. But I also did that full series of all 6 episodes of Tales of the Jedi that are releasing exactly 1 week after each. So on the 8th and the 22nd, you'll be able to get your hands on the Tales of the Jedi commentaries as well through the end of March, basically, with Clone Wars ending on April 1st. Speaking of which, let's see what's coming up. On February 22nd, we have the 4th episode commentary for Tales of the Jedi for the episode The Sith Lord. Then on March 1st, Clone Wars commentary for The Phantom Apprentice. On March 8th, the penultimate episode of Tales of the Jedi Season 1, Practice Makes Perfect. March 15th, the Ides of March, the Clone Wars episode Shattered, which I guess kind of fits the Ides of March. Bad stuff going down. Then we have the last episode of Season 1 for Tales of the Jedi getting its commentary. That's the episode Resolve on March 22nd, followed by the final episode commentary for the Clone Wars commentary number 134, released on April 1st. That is Victory and Death. And yes, 134, there are 133 regular episodes of the series, but there was a commentary for the Clone Wars film, of course. And yeah, that's basically it as far as those planned things that are already edited, ready to go, and scheduled. We will, of course, have Nobility of the Butlerverse Q&A episodes at the beginning of March, April, and May. So the final collection of questions will be throughout April for the one at the beginning of May. As I've mentioned previously, I don't want to belabor the point, the Patreon will be closing basically in early June. Once the billing cycle for those who were part of the Patreon during May has cycled at the beginning of June, the Patreon will be closed at that point. The commentaries will at that point become unavailable, but that shouldn't be an issue because the last of the commentaries is being released on April 1st. So you have all of April plus all of May if you want to jump in there and get it, or if you're already a member and you need to download them, you'll have that time to do it. 2 months essentially is a grace period to do that before everything winds up shutting down. The benefits for those who get mentioned here, which is everybody on the Patreon, or the benefits for the Nobility with their Q&As, are using those months that I previously mentioned in this episode just a moment ago. But early June is when it'll wrap up. But suffice to say, new stuff is out. Tales of the Jedi commentaries are running now in parallel to the Clone Wars commentaries, both at the same time, just as kind of like a little bonus series to wrap things up for the Patreon. Of course, most of my stuff at this point comes out through YouTube. At least the video content primarily comes out through YouTube because, you know, YouTube is a video platform. It's one of those days. Basically, at this point, we did actually have quite a few episodes released compared to some previous months, mostly because I was able to record some stuff in sort of big batches. That said, it's not a ton of really sort of focused stuff, not heavily focused on Star Wars itself as official releases. It's mostly like parodies, spoofs, and other stuff that have been in my collection that just haven't been featured on From the Star Wars Home Video Library previously. So we had episode 465 that looked at several releases of Hardware Wars. Then 466, which looked at some releases for one of my favorite parodies, George Lucas in Love. Then 467, looking at the parody Star Warped on DVD. 468 looked at the F True Hollywood Story for Jar Jar Binks. And then the last of that batch was the documentary about Australian Star Wars fans, the Fandom Menace, P-H-A-N-D-O-M, with P and D both capitalized, not to be confused with the modern movement or whatever you want to call it, which was episode 469 from the Star Wars Home Video Library. Then I did have a chance to record another batch again, so we had episode 470 from the Star Wars Home Video Library, which is To the Galaxy and Beyond, which is a documentary about basically 100 years of sci-fi storytelling leading up into the late 90s, which is hosted by Mark Hamill, of course, that also then features Star Wars to a degree within it. We had episode 471 looking at the Star Wars versus Star Trek, The Rivalry Continues DVD from Passport Video, such as it was. And then the last one released thus far was episode 472 called The Last Star Wars. It is basically a segment from 60 Minutes called The Last Star Wars that was released in 2006, originally recorded in 2005 with a new intro on it, which was made available through 60 Minutes and their whole like print-on-demand segment releases and things like that in that era. So, you know, we had some decent quantity of new episodes from the Star Wars Home Video Library, but not much in the way of actual official Star Wars releases for the most part, just sort of tangentially related or spoof stuff. As to what is coming up soon with that, just looking at my shelves here, not a lot. I'm going to have to look at some other parodies or some other documentaries that are sitting around, but there's not much. It's actually mostly not here where I'm looking, which is the DVDs. It's mostly some VHS cassettes that have been sitting here for ages, like that A&E biography thing and stuff like that, that I just haven't had a chance to really take much of a look at. I do have a Japanese Revenge of the Sith CD with the Musical Journey DVD in it that we'll be taking a look at when it arrives. I have a box set coming from the UK, but there's UK to US shipping issues right now, so that is kind of just sitting there parked in the UK for the moment. and just not a whole lot in the way of a bunch of new episodes with new content because we're still waiting for new releases to actually hit the market. We do, however, have those original trilogy steelbooks that are coming to Best Buy as part of the Disney 100 product line soon. I have those pre-ordered, waiting for those to show up, and I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, that maybe, just maybe, we'll see some releases at Walmart with the pins and some standard releases or something, so it's not just the steelbooks at Best Buy for those. But for right now, official Star Wars releases are down to a trickle, and all of our cash is going right now to medical bills and taxes, so I'm not exactly sitting on a pile of disposable income to go around and just start grabbing up a bunch. My guess will be my next focus will be on grabbing some more stuff from outside the United States. Not sure what markets in particular, but that said, there will of course be more for the series, and I do already have in mind what is going to be episode number 500, whenever we finally reach it. We're in the 470s right now, but who knows how long it's going to take to get 20 plus new episodes done, given the fact that there's no really new official releases coming except those that are coming a little while down the line here. So we'll just have to see as far as that goes. Before we get into something that's somewhat related to the idea of picking up releases to show on the show, I did want to very quickly note here that not any progress has been made on the spreadsheet recently, the one that's going to track the home video collection and that sort of thing. No progress there, no new writing or anything like that. My focus really has been on work, but just kind of bogged down in that stuff right now. So nothing in terms of new writing or anything like that at this point. But I did want to talk about something. I don't know why I keep doing this. I did want to talk about something that relates to picking up stuff for the show and finding stuff now that we kind of squeeze the American market dry of stuff to cover. And this actually plays into some messages that I received. I have my personal Facebook that I don't generally have just random people added to. I also have an author Facebook page that I don't use very much, that I use for any sort of like regular personal communication type stuff from time to time. But most of the stuff is just me posting in the Star Wars Home Video group on Facebook these days. Unless it's just some random observation or me asking a question or something like that on my personal page. I spend most of the time over there on the Home Video group. But every once in a while, because I kind of deal with stuff over there, of course I have the channel and everything, I will get a message about Star Wars Home Video stuff on that author page. Basically just asking a question through Facebook. And I had a couple of guys, I say a couple of guys because it was basically one guy sending the message that included a message from another guy recently asking about a Star Wars Home Video item that they found, got very excited about, and were wondering if I had seen it before. And the item in question turned out to be a bootleg. It happens to be that one of the more recent bootlegs that you will see, because the United States only got that version of a Skywalker Saga box set from Best Buy, but other regions like the UK got these boxed sets. You will see bootleggers trying to sell something that looks kind of like this for Blu-ray to supposedly include official Blu-ray releases of all 9 Skywalker Saga films, which for some reason have labels like these, not like what we would see in 2020 onward. I think of it a little bit as something kind of like the supposed DVD version of this that was a bootleg, because there was a Blu-ray release but no DVD to go with it, that would cause people to think, well, surely there must have been a DVD version, therefore if I see it, it must be legit, because there is a legit Blu-ray version. We debunked that in a special episode of From the Star Wars Home Video Library quite a while ago. But you figure that somebody would see the big sets, right, the 4K/Blu-ray/digital sets, think surely there must be a regular Blu-ray set out there, and when seeing one that looks like that, which is an official release in another market, think that it must be legit, when it is not. It's just the way bootleggers tend to prey on the assumptions of the market, or the assumptions of potential buyers who may not know any better. So I basically had the unfortunate duty of informing this person that the thing they were really excited about was bullshit. It was a bootleg, it's fake, it's not an official release. I wouldn't waste the money on it. It's not legit. Which sucks, right? To be the bearer of that bad news. Nice that I could be helpful. Glad that I could help. Maybe help them avoid a purchase of something that is a bootleg when they're looking for something official. But it is an unpleasant kind of moment. But it brought me back to a day recently that really kind of sucked. And bear with me, because I want to tell this as almost a cautionary tale, but it helps to know why this hit me as hard as it did, in terms of motivation, in terms of interest, whatever you want to call it, like my oomph, what caused my get up and go to get up and go without me, basically, got up and went. So I had a day where I had to have a meeting. Now, I've mentioned before, I teach online, so primarily I work from home. But there are times when we have meetings for the entire team, typically monthly, sometimes a little more frequent, but usually monthly. And depending on where there's actual available space for as big a team as we have, a lot of times these meetings are pretty far flung from where we live. The Atlanta metro area is enormous, lots of different counties. You'll find that our county that we live in is kind of weird because it's a very north-south stretched kind of county. So the county itself, I want to say, is something like 80 miles long or something like that, 80 miles north-south, but much more narrow east-west. But a lot of times what will happen is we'll have a meeting that is on the complete opposite side of the county from where we live, which is on the other far end of the county. As a result, if I have a meeting at 8:30, I need to be basically hitting the road at 6:30 because I have to assume it's going to take me an hour to an hour and a half just to get there, and that traffic could wind up adding time to it. So 2 hours to be safe to get to a meeting in the same county that we live in. Thank you, Atlanta morning traffic. This particular day, it was worse because right after I got past the last possible exit, before the exit that I needed on a highway known as Georgia 400, which kind of goes straight north out of Atlanta, right after passing the last possible chance to get off of that before my exit, there was a truck that caught fire, like a semi-rig that caught fire. Thankfully, it doesn't look like anybody was hurt. But as a result, traffic came to a stop. And I spent, as a result, an hour and 45 minutes to go 3 miles. My commute changed from one that's usually hour to an hour and a half, give it 2 hours just in case, to a 3-hour commute, missing the first hour of the meeting. Now, the meeting itself was only scheduled for like 3.5 hours anyway, so the meeting winds up lasting another 2.5 hours, which means that I was at the meeting less time than it took me just to get there. Then I needed to drive back. Thankfully, traffic wasn't horrible on the drive back, but on the drive back, it turns out that one of my teachers that I oversee as part of our department had a wreck. Is fine, but had a wreck. And right as I'm about to stop and get food and finally come home, I get word from my wife that as she's been watching our son, he dropped like an easel thing that he has to like practice writing on a dry erase board directly onto one of her toes, fracturing it in 2 places. I get home, and the positive is, I know there's a package waiting for me that I've been excited about and waiting for a while. You might recall that in some previous episodes of From the Star Wars Home Video Library, we looked at promotional DVDs coming out of Prometheus Entertainment, the company behind some of the Star Wars documentaries. A while back, we saw the Empire of Dreams one, and then fairly recently, I managed to acquire the one for Legacy Reveal. This being a particularly unusual one because it's a different cut of Legacy Reveal than on any of the other screener copies that I have. They never released it to retail or anything. These two, legit, psyched about them. I wanted more. But I didn't actually try to search for them. However, I had left a saved search on my eBay, and 3 items appeared relatively quickly back to back, which should have given me a clue that I wound up picking up, which turned out to actually all be from the same seller, who I figured, hopefully, meant that this person was like, you know, someone within that circle for Prometheus unloading stuff. So it makes sense that if someone was going to have any of these, or someone was going to have multiple, surely, you know, they'd all kind of run in the same circle, so to speak. Boy, that was a convoluted way of saying it. Suffice to say, I thought that seeing multiple meant somewhat trustworthy in this case. So I picked up 3, and now I don't believe I'm going to ever show them on From the Star Wars Home Video Library. This looks to be, purports to be, and could very well be, possibly, Star Wars Creatures, which is from an Anno Planet program. This purports to be a Blu-ray version of this, and looks a lot like one that a fellow collector acquired, you know, a matter of what, like a year or 2 ago. And then Legacy Revealed, which purports to be a Blu-ray version of this. So I get them, I'm excited. It's the silver lining in a really crappy day. And as always, I post what new has arrived in the home video group. And then things started spiraling a little bit that sort of took the wind out of my sails. Because this is HD. This is the version you would see on the DVD, very much like this one. The 2004 DVD is very much like this one. It is not the edited Disney Plus version, and I knew something with this cover, this type of cover, was out there because I'd seen a fellow collector have it. But that fellow collector let me know that this sure looked like it was probably a bootleg because the cover art is something he created. He took the original cover art from this, the real version of this, that was in a DVD case but with different cover than this, and pared it down to fit a Blu-ray case. And also at one point he or somebody else took that Blu-ray master and made it available to others within a forum or something. Such that, apparently, this eBay seller, who apparently is somewhat notorious, it seems, for bootlegs within a certain segment of the community that looks at, recreations of stuff and whatnot, more than likely downloaded his cover that he created, this other person in the community who had the real deal, made this cover, and then produced a bootleg of the disc. Thing is, yes, it's a writable Blu-ray, but the bulk of these things are writable. These legit ones are writable. They're internal promotional DVDs. Of course, they're not going to be mass-produced. So that isn't a dead giveaway of something being bullshit, of something being a bootleg. So very quickly determined this is probably 99.9999% bootleg, unless they're just a version of this that no one had ever seen. This is HD. This is the different cut that is on this. It's not something somebody could have gotten off of television. But, it's basically just a Blu-ray case version of this. It is a writable disc. It's a great program, but I have no idea whether it's legit or not, and I lean on the idea of this probably isn't legit because it's the same seller that sold this. So more than likely, somebody at some point had a legit HD master from like the same kind of thing that happened with this one, just wasn't necessarily the same guy, put it up there, and sure enough, we wound up getting a bootleg version of that. This looks very much like these. I have no idea about the cover art or anything like that, who would have made it, if anyone, if it was made by a fan or something like that. But I will say that because it came from the same person, despite the fact that it looks very much like these legit ones, I don't trust it. So here I am excited about 3 things that I really wanted to see, that I really wanted to have. And it is nice to have HD versions of these, don't get me wrong. Just to be able to watch them. But I thought I was getting Prometheus promotional DVDs, as was the case previously, or in this case, Blu-rays and 1 DVD. And I've come to decide that I'm not going to show any of them on the show, because as far as I know, they're bootlegs. I can't verify the existence of 2 of them. The one that I could verify the existence of, it's not in the same form, and so on. And the reason I bring that up, aside from that, just a crappy day. It was the final period at the bottom of the exclamation pointer, on the bottom of the question mark. It was the boop sandwich to finish the buffet. Is to say, in relation to that message from those fellow collectors about the Skywalker Saga set that they thought was legit, that was bootleg. And that is, it can happen to the best of us. It can happen to anyone. I am pretty damn versed on Star Wars home video releases, particularly from the United States. Literally wrote the books on it. But then again, how many times have you heard me say on From the Star Wars Home Video Library, hey, here's a cool new product that I didn't even know existed until, right? And it's even tougher when you're looking at something that gets you very excited, that you think logically could or should exist, but which you cannot verify exists legitimately. and you're in that immediate must get kind of mode because you think it's very cool and maybe something unusual to pick up. In this case, I let the fact that I was really enjoying these, and the fact that I was hoping for more, and the fact that I knew there was a Blu-ray version of Empire of Dreams out there with a particular style of art on it, override any further judgments and had me jump at them when I saw them on eBay, pick them up as a batch, and yeah, it turns out they're basically just going to sit. I mean, I can watch them to be able to see HD versions of like Legacy Revealed, which is nice, but and to see the creatures thing, which you can't really see anywhere else that I've found, but I don't really trust them. Not even the one that looks like it could be more legit than the others, because, you know, same seller, Prometheus, I just don't trust it. So the point being that even, you know, no matter how expansive your knowledge is, there will always be gaps within it. There will always be things that a bootlegger can exploit. What you can try to do is be as knowledgeable as possible, know the warning signs as much as possible, be informed about what's out there and what's not, what is bootlegs for sure and what's not. For instance, you know, if you're looking at Andor, Mandalorian Season 1 and 2 and so on, there are no legitimate releases of those out there, so of course they're going to be bootlegs. But just having that background knowledge, but everyone's level of knowledge will be different. It's just important to remember that despite the fact that everyone's knowledge is different, and maybe, you know, someone like me could recognize the bootleg that was brought up by those other guys and warn them away from it, the more obscure you get, the more an expansive knowledge base isn't going to help you, because there will still be gaps in that knowledge base. That's why I think when it comes to this stuff, when it comes to timelines or anything else with Star Wars stuff or with collecting and collecting communities, it is always important to be humble. I would like to think that I come off that way most of the time. I know I didn't when I was very young. When I was in my like late teens, like into my like early to mid 20s, I know I was an egotistical douche nozzle when it came to anything related to Star Wars kind of stuff. It was very much the "don't you know who I am" kind of stuff when someone tried to challenge, say, on a timeline related thing or that kind of thing. I look back on it, kind of laugh at myself and shake my head of what the arrogance of an ego of youth did, and how I was, and versus now, which is, I'd like to think, very different. But just wanted to note that. So if you've ever run across that, like the guys in our cautionary tale here, like me in the cautionary tale here, you're not alone. Bootleggers thrive on going into holes in a market and trying to exploit it as best they can in as legitimate looking a way as possible, much of the time on the US market. There are some markets where they're obviously, you know, not real, or you have releases of things that obviously never existed, like the Star Wars Holiday Special. But you know, the more time goes on, the more sophisticated bootleggers have become. It's not like the bootlegs back in the 80s. It's just not. Which means being on your guard, and every once in a while you'll fall into a trap, as I did in this case. At least I believe I did in this case. And you can let that discourage you. It certainly discouraged me immediately. It took the wind out of my sails on a day that was already garbage and set the garbage on fire. It was not a good day. And this was just the end cap of a very bad day. Though obviously it could have been much, much, much worse. My wife's foot could have been broken, not just fractured. You know, I could have gotten into a wreck or been the one whose wreck stalled everything. You know, it's sort of one of those count your blessings type of thing. It could always be worse. But hopefully running into that sort of thing provides a cautionary tale and a moment to say, damn it, and just, but then to kind of let it go, so that the collecting spirit that someone has, the collecting energy that someone has, the oomph, the emphasis, the interest, doesn't wane, doesn't disappear. I'd like to think that that would be the case for most. And I know there are folks who are out there who actually just collect bootlegs, so to them it wouldn't probably matter all that much anyway. Just wanted to share that, you know, as I'm sitting here having to be the one, my shirt doesn't feel straight right now, as I'm sitting here being the one to break the bad news to someone shortly after I had to effectively get the bad news broken to me. I know how it goes. I know how it feels. It sucks. It's not fun. But hopefully it doesn't, at least in the long term, discourage a collecting energy, a collecting spirit, because there really is some great stuff out there to find. And part of the fun is learning the ins and outs of what does and does not exist. It's just that sometimes our knowledge fails us, and it takes somebody else to tap us on the shoulder and say, hey, let's actually look a little more closely at this thing you just picked up and whether or not it's legit. And I'm thankful for that within the community, that there are people who are willing to still tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, wait a second, let's look closer at this thing. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, but in this case, I believe they're absolutely right, and I wasted some cash here, but it's nice to at least know that, so I'm not providing incorrect information to viewers out there. I take that as a responsibility to try my best not to accidentally provide false information, and if I do, to always correct it. So unfortunately, we will not be seeing these on the show. I'll keep them around for now just to be able to watch the stuff in HD or watch the other program. But yeah, to those who messaged me and may have had the wind let out of their sails about that Skywalker Saga Blu-ray set that wasn't legit, believe me, I know where you're coming from. It happens. And with that, we will wrap up this episode, this monthly update here. Hopefully there'll be more stuff to talk about in terms of new releases and new interesting stuff as we head into March. We'll just have to see. I imagine won't be a whole lot, but probably some episodes are from the Star Wars Home Video Library, hopefully, if I get a chance to look at that stuff, and that thing comes in with the Japanese, musical journey and all that on it. So, yeah, just keep an eye out on here in the Patreon for new stuff, and as always, I will catch you in a month.